My family originally came to Philadelphia. My mother's family originally came to Philadelphia in the 19-teens. We're our Mexican heritage. My family is originally from Texas, from West Texas, and we trace our roots to back when Texas was Mexico. So that's sort of where my family comes from, is the part of Texas that used to be Mexico. So when the border changed, we were citizens, and like it or not. And but my great-grandparents came to Philadelphia. There were a lot of building jobs that were happening. My great-grandfather was a stonemason, and so the Ben Franklin Bridge was about to be built, and it rests on stone pillars, and so they needed cheap, skilled labor. And so the construction companies were all over, and they were going to go maybe to Detroit, and I know that they lived in Tennessee for a minute before they came to Philadelphia, but they came, and my grandfather worked on the bridge, and I think also on the art museum was built around the same time. That's also a stone building. So they came to be for work. I was raised pretty much in North Philly, then moved to New Jersey for middle school and high school, came back after college, lived in West Philly, and then a couple years ago my partner and I bought a house in South Philly, not far from where I was born. But it's funny, I don't remember living in South Philly. My parents moved before I could remember, and so I mostly grew up in North Philly. K&A, the hood, one of them.
Okay.
Around F and Allegheny is where I mostly grew up.
Okay.
And when I moved to New Jersey, around middle school. This would have been the early 80s, early to mid 80s. Around 82 is when I moved to New Jersey. It had everything to do. I went to public school, and it had everything to do with the fact that middle school I was supposed to go to was pretty dangerous, and I was a short little kid, and the neighborhood itself was getting dangerous. I didn't know this then, but looking back, it was during the time that crack first hit the streets, right? And it was crazy things were happening, but it was very slowly happening, but then it exploded, right? So I had an aunt who lived in New Jersey who was just like, send her here. I pay all these school taxes. I don't have any children. And the school, like I said, I was going to go to was pretty rough. And I didn't want to go to New Jersey. She lives right over in Collingswood, so it's not far. I didn't want to go, but my mom was like, you're going. And the school, my mom still stayed here, and I came back a lot on the weekend. So even though I was away for a few years, my mom was here in town until I want to say I was about 16, and then she got out too. But Philly was always my home. So I went to undergrad at Westchester University, which is the closest state school to Philadelphia. And so I could be far enough away that I really needed to live there, but I could come home anytime I wanted. And so that was important to me. Yeah, I mean, that was a big part of it. The other part of it was that I was going to pay for it myself, right? And I had gotten some scholarship offers. I went to a really great high school, and and I did well there. And but I was definitely kind of a standout student, not in the sense that I was so smart, but because I was smart, but not super smart. It wasn't I wasn't motivated enough to be valedictorian or anything like that. It didn't mean that much to me. But I was definitely motivated as a student. But I wasn't particularly driven. But I went to a suburban high school, and we had the high school I went to was not at all diverse. Very much like my neighborhood in North Philly was not diverse at all. I was a diversity in North Philly, in Kensington, and I was called every name, right? When the kids, usually the Catholic school kids would, kids who didn't know me would call me names, and I was called Greek and any other but they would say Greek in the same way that they would say a true slur, right? And so I would get all of them, and I think as kids you don't really know what any of them mean. So anybody who's different is all of those things. So I got the Asian slurs, the African American slurs, the Latino slurs. I got all of them, and so difference is difference. But so my neighborhood growing up as a kid was very homogenous. right? The distinction really was between ethnic white kids, right? Like, well, I'm Irish, or I'm Polish, you know. And in New Jersey, it was the same way, but different. It was very homogenous. The kids were definitely nicer, right? I think city kids are just tough, you know. I remember moving over to Jersey and just being kind of struck by the fact that kids were nice, and I kind of thought that they were like gonna do something to me. It's like, are you trying to like, wait, like, you know, why are you being so nice, you know? But these kids were nice. But it was also a very homogenous setting. In my high school graduating class, it was myself and another student who were the Latino population. There was maybe 4 APIs, including South Asians. And then also there were maybe, I think we had maybe 4 African American students in my graduating class. So it was pretty much like, it was pretty homogenous, right? And that was out of a graduating class of about 130 students. So there wasn't a lot of, you know, I think anybody who was different really stood out. So I had gotten some offers from school. I was one of the only students of color graduating from that class, and I'd gotten some scholarship offers, and it made me mad. Like, I didn't feel like it wasn't validating. I was like, I'm like the only Latina girl. I'm the only Latina in this class. That's why I'm getting this scholarship offer, you know. And the reality was, I did well on my SATs. I was a good student, you know. Like, I didn't, you know, probably got some of those offers for my grades, you know. But I was just kind of like, I don't know what I was going through, but I was like, any of the schools that gave me offers of like rides, and I got some nice offers, I turned them down. I was like, I'm not doing that. And there was part of me that needed, I think, to know that if I was in a school, is because I earned it and I should be there. There were definitely things that, like, when I was trying to understand about, like, you know, the neighborhood and what was going on there, and you know, so that was I started taking some urban studies classes and really wanted to get connected to community work that was happening in the neighborhood that I grew up in. So I started volunteering. I was looking for activism, anybody who was doing things about the neighborhood. And it was funny because some of the classes I was taking, you know, there's this sort of, there's always that fine line between, you know, poverty and criminals, right? Like criminalizing poor people. And, you know, that would come up, and keep in mind, I'm in a state school, pretty working class ethics, people who come from backgrounds where they're striving upward. And, you know, sometimes you look poorly on what's sort of where, you know, what's behind you, or where you've come up from. But so it was kind of conservative in some of the rhetoric among students, and there would be comments made about neighborhoods, and, you know, the neighborhood I grew up in was a rough neighborhood, but sort of rough and bad, you know, or like, I see it as a rough neighborhood. I mean, but not completely. I mean, there were definitely people. One of the things that I was kind of unresolved about was that I remember very clearly waking up on the weekends to the smell of bleach, and that's because the moms would be outside scrubbing their steps, right? So like, there's like, most of the steps in the city and neighborhoods are marble, right? And so like, there would be like these little Polish ladies outside scrubbing their steps and bleach and ammonia, right? So like, that's some of my memories as a kid, waking up to like the smell of ammonia and bleach, right? Because people were literally out there scrubbing the sidewalk. Now, that's not bad, right? But I realized after I moved that, like, we were poor, right? And so like, you know, so poor, rough and bad are not the same to me, right? But that's how things kind of play out sometimes. So I kind of, I wanted to know about, like, what were the good things that were happening, and I remembered a lot of good things in this neighborhood that went through a really tough time. You know, eventually people stopped scrubbing their steps, and people moved, and anybody who could leave did. And, you know, and that had a lot to do with the fact that, well, look, all these jobs left, you know, and then more drugs came in. You know, there was always somebody out there doing something, but, like, you know, stuff came in. It just became less stable, you know, and but that had everything to do with economics and opportunity, you know. But I imagine that there were still good people in those neighborhoods, you know, people who couldn't leave or people who chose to stay. And so I wanted to get connected to community work. So that's when I sort of not stopped sort of the direction of law school. And I was like, no, I really want to be engaged on the community level. And so I started doing volunteer work and trying to find activist things that were happening in the neighborhood.
Mayor Nutter had a longer relationship with the community. The LGBT community was starting at a different place than Mayor Street started. Mayor Street, when he left, was in a totally different place than when he started, too. But there was really no love for him when Mayor Street started. Mayor Nutter comes in with a lot of support and sort of widely acknowledged that he, of the folks that really backed him from the earliest time, he was the true underdog. I'm not sure how much you know about that campaign, but he was a true underdog. But the folks who supported him from the earliest time of them were members of the LGBT community, in part because, of his track record on LGBT issues. The domestic partner bill, which passed in late 90s, and which then provided domestic partner benefits for all city employees. That was hugely significant, more than just for the city. I mean, it was, private businesses then followed suit if they didn't already have it. It also established a relationship recognition program called Life Partnership, which is the closest thing that we have to any kind of marriage. It's a relationship recognition. And it's a registration, and any of the taxes that the city controls, folks who are registered as life partners are treated in the same way in the eyes of any city taxes. So it really comes into play with property, if you own joint property, and if you're transferring property to each other. So I knew a lot of folks who were applying, definitely folks who could have lent a lot. I knew that I was bringing experience with services, and I had been working and had been providing services to some of our most at risk and in need people for a long time, and I understood that. Like, that is really where everything that I've done has been about that. And so it's like, I know it. I know the city. I'm a Philadelphian. This is my hometown. And so I get it, and I care, and I know a couple things. And so at the end of the day, I decided to apply because of that. When Mayor Nutter came in, he was like, send me your resumes. Right? That's literally what he said. Right? We're hiring. Right, so he said it on the day of his inauguration, send me your resumes. So there wasn't like a clear way to apply. So I figured out how to apply, sent it in. Their process was almost wrapping up. And then a couple days later, I got a call to meet with the mayor. And so this is like the second interview. What I didn't know is that the mayor really doesn't do the second interviews. He liked to make the offer, right? So this was the offer. It was still an interview. We met in the next room over in his office, and I grew up here at a time when City Hall is the tallest building in the city, right? So, like, just coming in here was like, nervous, My interview was on a Saturday with the mayor. And so, we had a great conversation, and then, I was offered the job. The mayor did a press conference for the major appointments. There's always a big press conference over in the mayor's reception room. So, like, I've been saying this to people that everybody should be able to start a job where you walk into a room and people are cheering. But that's the way I got to start this job, right? Press conference. It was, I'm told, up till that time and for some time after, it was the largest press conference that we had had.
Wow.
And so there was a lot of, definitely a lot of support. And I felt the love, And it was really meaningful to me that the first row of folks were a number of my friends, trans women, African-American trans women, who I'd worked with over the year. And, usually the first row is your family, right? So my mom and everybody, my cousins are in the second row. The first row is, trans women who are, like, giving the mayor a hard time, even during the press conference. So I'm just like, that's cool. You know what I mean? Like, the folks who are in the first row see themselves as my family, and I see them that way too. And so that was really like a very, very, very meaningful way to start a gig like this.